Hello and welcome back to another EDH deck design video. Today I'm going to be showing a temporary deck I put together just to kind of get another mono blue deck at one of my tables, one of my metas there. I've done this quite a few times. In fact, one of my older videos on the channel here, well, older, is the Gwendolyn de Course clone deck. She's been revented into a different deck, so I still had all my clones. So I decided to put together just a big old pirate deck. All blue, mono blue clones, and play your deck kind of effects. My favorite mono blue general is actually Rayne, because she does not dictate what the deck actually does. The ideal general for a clone deck would be something like Sakashima in mono blue. But I like Rayne because she looks very passive. She actually has a tendency to net you quite a couple of cards. This is just classically known, an older character from the old Dominaria storyline, where she was Baron's wife. She was one of the teachers at the the original Tolarian Academy. She died when Griel went after her. As a card, she's a 3-mana little 1/1. Looks pretty insignificant. Her ability says whenever my targets, or like my permanents or myself, am targeted by a spell or an ability from an opponent. For example, if she were to be terminated, or if I myself, the opponent, would be like lightning bolted in the face, I get to draw a card. If she is enchanted, I get to draw 2 cards. So it doesn't look overly threatening, like a passive source of card advantage, maybe a little diverting to make the opponents not want to target my stuff. But what she does is she clearly does not represent what the deck does. And in a mono blue deck, that's pretty good. This is a theme deck. I may eventually switch over to Sakashima. I always have a preference for her, but as you see, this entire deck is themed around clones and taking the opponent stuff. So I think I have everything that is currently printed that would fit that theme. If they make more, I will have to make more cuts, which means maybe moving Sakashima to the command zone. So let's set Rayne over here. The bare bones parts of the deck is, of course, clones. So I'm running as many as I think that. I've done a little bit of research. I haven't really kept up with a lot of new cards. I might be missing a couple. If I am, let me know. But here are the actual hard clones. That would be Phantasmal Image, the nice 2-mana clone. Ghetto clone, the original. Phyrexian Metamorph is a potential cheapy artifact or creature clone. There is Sakashima, a good bounce clone. She can always reset herself. She can also end up being a 3/1 if we actually just need a general creature. Here's her student, a potentially 2-mana clone if I can get some combat damage off, or unblocked at least. Body Double is a graveyard clone. A Clever Impersonator is essentially the strictly better clone ever printed because it can clone anything. Well, any non-land, that is. Mercurial is a variant, essentially a worse version of Sakashima. He can bounce himself, but it costs a little bit more. Then we have the Vesuvan Doppelganger and the Vesuvan Shapeshifter. I do not have the Pickles lock in here. I'm not too fond of that, but that's actually almost it. We have a 7/7 clone. It's essentially just a 7-mana costing clone that enters as a 7/7 creature. That's it for the hard clones itself. The problem with a clone deck is, while I'm relying on your cards, the opponent's cards, for having good creatures, oftentimes there's just no good targets. So I have to have a fairly good selection of legitimate targets if I have a handful of clones and nothing to actually use them with. So while I have about 10 or so clones, I had to have a little bit over 10 targets just so I had a potential use for them. So we have a Burnished Hart and a Sad Robot. Sad Robot is actually my favorite thing to clone in this deck. There's a lot of spells coming up that generate some good tempo advantage, and cloning him actually really helps. Same thing, Mulldrifter is good card advantage and nice clone target. Archaeomancer is a fantastic target to clone in this deck since there's a lot of spells like Ghostly Flicker and whatnot coming up. Duplicant's another good target, kind of on theme since it is a pseudo, not quite a clone, just getting rid of something. Deadeye is perfect for clones. A lot of stuff enters the battlefield and does stuff, especially a clone, so this is perfect for resetting it. Sphinx is great to clone to get me some extra cards. Kederekt Leviathan is one of my favorite cards. This tends to cause a lot of moans and groans, but it's not nearly as bad as like a Devastation Tide. Being a creature means it can be repeatedly used if I can flicker it. That tends to make people annoyed, but at the same time, it's a very expensive card to get out there in the first place. Of course, cloning it means I can keep looping it back to my hand, the original that is, as the clone would take its place. Jace's Mindseeker is kind of suck, but for the theme of the deck, I'm trying to play out the opponent's deck. Not as severely as my Jaleva combo deck, but this deck is more casual, more for shenanigans, and this kind of fits that bill. And Phyrexian Ingester is another pseudo-clone, not really a clone, just a exile, and he grows per the exile creature. Gilded Drake is what the rest of the theme of the deck is doing, just taking stuff. And again, this is great if I can flicker him. It's going to come back in and we can re-switch things. Keiga is along the lines of the theft. I don't mind him dying, and if I clone him, I can let the clone go to the graveyard and still keep him active and still thieve. I'm really enjoying this card. I like the morph mechanics are always fun, but this particular one is really good for what this theme is trying to do. I can essentially spelljack someone's spell with a creature. I don't have any way of unmorphing it or flickering up and down past the Vesuvian guy there, but essentially just thieving people's spells, and this is actually a pretty fun card. Definitely not fast enough for any kind of competitive play, but it's a novelty. And then we have these two guys to help me thieve some spells out of someone's graveyard. Sadly, this one does exile, so I can't go infinite with turn stealing, but this one, of course, does let me do that. Pretty good with clones and Deadeye and whatnot. So that's a pretty stout creature package. A lot of that's themed after, again, taking someone else's stuff. Let's go on to the spells. There's a pretty good chunk of spells in here. With clones, I really need the ability to reset a clone. The idea is most of the clones will use or copy some enter the battlefield effect, so I can gain the advantage as my opponents do. This helps me reset it, actually 2 of them. Also, this does hit artifacts on land, so if I have the Sculpting Steel coming up, this can help it reset as well. Rift is just a powerhouse card. There is not a whole bunch of protection and not a lot of control. This is a mono blue deck with a whopping 2 counterspells. So Cyclonic Rift and AEtherspouts are kind of necessary to keep us alive. There was an evacuation in here, but I ended up taking it out. Fact is good for card draw. And we're back onto the clones. Cackling Counterpart is great because it's an instant speed clone, but again, this can only be something on my side of the battlefield. A lot of people forget that. Same thing, Fated Infatuation gives me a chance to also scry if I do it on my turn. Both these cost 3 mana. I still like Counterpart better because I can flash it back again. Scry is always helpful, but as an instant, I tend to always do this on the end of opponent's turns. Supplant Form is a very expensive bounce spell, but it also nets me a token clone. Twin Cast is... I was tempted to put a whole bunch of misdirection effects in here, but this is the only one that made the cut. Gather Specimens is a really good answer to someone's Genesis Wave or their Tooth and Nail Entwined. It's just me taking someone else's creatures. Commandeer is kind of along the same effects. Doing this for free, any kind of free spell, is just a very broken effect. Sadly, I can't super abuse this as I can't gain creatures, but at the same time, taking advantage of anyone else's big ramp spells, big game ending spells is just awesome. As I said, there's 2 counterspells in the deck, 2 very poor quality counterspells in my opinion. I don't like expensive spells, and being a 5 and a 6 mana costing counterspells suck, but at the same time, I gain the card. This one lets me take artifact and creature spells, and this one lets me just keep their spell exiled until I want it. Curse the Spine, oh, that's a little out of order. This should have been an earlier there. Essentially an answer for blue, exile, and blue is really good. Flow of Ideas is a very powerful draw spell. There's not a lot of non-basics in here. Again, this was semi-budget when I started, so I haven't put a whole bunch of extra good lands in here, but this tends to draw me just a massive amount of cards. Same thing, Reoccurring Insight's more popular here. Order of Succession is a cute card. I just wanted to find a place for this. I've had this in my binder essentially since the last year's Commander set came out. And it seems funny, the idea is there. I really like the flavor. It's a shame it's not an instant. It would probably see more play if it was. This is honestly a very whimsical card because oftentimes there's just nothing fun to take. It's more for shenanigans, and it fits the theme of the deck. If it didn't, it probably would never see play. What's 1 clone when you can have 5? Clone Legion is also another very whimsical card. Oftentimes, the way this deck has panned out so far, is I am matching the opponent's creatures, but oftentimes they will hold back because the way you beat a clone deck is just not to play your powerful creatures. So this ends up usually just getting me 2 clones, 1 or 2 essentially good clones. I have not had any massive game swings with this. I had the potential to take someone's Craterhoof Behemoth fall in after the Tooth and Nail and Twine, but we were not able to survive that turn because he had another trick in his hand to stop me from messing up his attack. Obviously, that would have been awesome if I did get his Craterhoof and did my own attack like that. Stolen Identity is a clone. Usually want to hold on to this until I can guarantee some kind of combat so I can get a second clone. Spell Twine is more take the opponent's deck effects. Bribery is a direct take the opponent's creature out of their deck. Mill till I get an opponent's creature. Just take someone's artifact and take someone's spell. I'm going with that piracy theft theme there. Now there's actually not a lot of enchantments. You would think with her there would be a whole bunch of auras. There's only one. The reason is because someone actually gave me this particular card. I was complimenting the artwork, Sam, which I love the artwork itself. This is the only in here because someone gave it to me and because I can stick it on Rayne. Rayne tends to just be left alone. When you throw an enchantment on her, that's when people decide it's time to remove her. So ideally, I wanted to put an enchantment on her that would let me draw a card. And this fits actually really well. Scry is nice, but to just tap her and draw a card. If they try to remove her afterward, I'll draw 2. But no matter what, I'm going to get a card out of this if I try to enchant Rayne with this. The rest of the enchantments are all clone and copy nonsense. So we have Dance of Many, another 2 mana possible clone with a slight upkeep. Mirror Mastery, or Mockery is fantastic. This is something I really like seeing on a Sad Robot. If I can pop this on anybody's Sad Robot, mine or the opponent's early game, and I can keep on swinging with it into unfavorable blocks, then I will get a very, very quick tempo advantage. Then we have Copy Artifact and Enchantment, like copying Soul Rings and Gilded Lotuses and whatnot, or someone's Mirari's Wake or whatever's good. And Spellweaver Volute, it's honestly terrible. This is only good really in late games. What it does is it copies, when it enters the battlefield, it actually enchants a sorcery. No, it enchants an instant in someone's graveyard. But whenever I cast a sorcery, I have about 13 in the deck. I can copy the instant, it's exiled, and this pops over to another instant in a graveyard. Enchanting something in a graveyard is confusing as hell. Requiring me to cast a sorcery after this just to make use, situational. So really this only works out past turn 10, effectively, because there has to be a good instant that's worth targeting. Like throwing this out there just to get someone's like Path to Exile, that works, but if there's no other instances in the graveyard after I cast a sorcery, then this just sits there and it doesn't do anything. It's overcosted and it really is too situational, but it's cute and it's gimmicky and it fits the theme. And of course, Mono Blue, Future Sight, good advantage, whatnots. Running out of permanents, we are down to the artifacts. There's actually no Planeswalkers in this deck. It didn't really fit, and again, this started as a budget. Soul Ring is actually our only accelerant. I am running 37 lands and a Soul Ring. It's probably not enough. I'll probably need to bump up a few more lands. Didn't really want to put too much artifact accelerants in here since it didn't fit the theme. Sculpting Steel is our last clone effect, where I can clone artifacts, like Gilded Lotus. Mimic Vat is not quite a clone effect. I just get to steal someone's creature when it dies, so I can try to make copies of it. And then I do run the Shard and the Portal. Again, I'm a massive chunk of clones. It's really good to reset them. This can, of course, target opponent's creatures if they try to tap out. But this is mostly here just so I can bounce a clone and reuse it itself. I do have to be careful with the Phantasmal Image because both of these do target. That's actually it. Let's go on to the lands to finish the deck. Again, there's 37. I'll most likely bump this up to 38 because, again, only a Soul Ring as artifact accelerant and the curve's somewhat high. Temple, just for extra cards. I like this card. It usually looks a little passive. A lot of people don't recognize it. Some people will see, like, one of the Kheru lands or something like a Lotus Veil, and they will recognize that and want to destroy it. This one's pretty exotic. Well, it depends on the meta, really. But it is a land that taps for 2. A lot of people kind of I think it's because the artwork and the layer of the card, a lot of people just don't recognize it, so they leave it alone. But that's okay. It's a land that taps for 2, and it does actually have the ability to scry a little bit. Mirrored Landscapes, a land that nets at 2. Reliquary Tower is an obvious inclusion. Mystifying Maze is kind of a filler. I wish this could attack or flicker my own creatures, but it can't. And then the rest are all the same land from Shadowmoor. I just like the heavy purple. It's kind of hard to catch. I had a few foil of these. I don't have the foils anymore, but the purple on blue looks really sweet, especially with purple sleeves. There's not a whole bunch. I was looking for the deck that I never got around to. Vidalcan Shackles would be ideal, but that's just a card I haven't had a chance to pick up. I don't really think it fits the price that it's currently at, approximately like $15. I don't think it's seeing enough to play to actually warrant that price, so if it drops, I'll probably pick one up for this deck. But yeah, that's Rayne. Again, this is just a generic clone deck. A lot of people, a lot of metas. This is pretty common, really. Clones are just a flavorful theme. Not really a tribal thing, but it's more or less a themed deck that can sit down at just about any table. It scales with the power level of the table very well. So it's actually pretty good to take to about anybody, new players, experienced players. There's not a lot of control. Again, this is a blue deck with 2 counter spells that are way too expensive. It's an interesting deck. It's more for funs. If you had any experience like this, definitely let us know. If also I've missed anything, again, I haven't been keeping up with a lot of new cards recently, definitely let me know if I've missed a couple things here. Thanks.